We are reviewing the Singapore Grand Prix today, won from pole by George Russell, joined on the podium by Max Verstappen and Lando Norris in third place, championship leader Oscar Piastri in fourth. Slow burner has been mentioned, Sam. I still don't think it burned a lot when it did burn, but the second half was at least something more than the first half.
I was going to say, show me the match, Ben. Where is that coming out yet? Has it happened?
It's a small match.
It was a tough watch for a Singapore GP. Now, the Singapore GP can be a tricky one because it is a street circuit. It is tight and winding. But when a racetrack has had this many alterations made to it, and it's got 4 DRS zones, and there was a little threat of a slippery surface at the start, come on, at that point, you've got to have something happening. Still, the biggest talking point was Lance Stroll screwing about his 100-year-old medium tyres, and how Lewis Hamilton doesn't have any brakes to just cut every corner under the sun.
Honestly, I was going to try and start this episode positively because I've got like 12 rants lined up, it feels like,
I can't wait.
This episode. So much of this annoyed me. But there are positives to talk about. We're going to be going through the midfield battle that Alonso eventually came out ahead of. Behrman and Carlos Sainz also scoring points. Kimi Antonelli beating both Ferraris to finish P5. McLaren P3 and P4 good enough to claim and reclaim the Constructors' Championship, defending it from last year. But let's start with that battle out front. George Russell taking his second race victory of the season, following on from his win at Canada early in the year. Same result in that it was Max Verstappen as his closest challenger this time out. But unlike Canada, not a lot of pressure from him. How impressed were you by what George Russell was able to do?
There was an interesting comment from the Sky Comms. I know a lot of you listening don't get the Sky Comms, but early on there was talk about how the race leader in many occasions here at Singapore has backed the grid up, usually treating it like a big snake. So those behind the race leader can't essentially execute the undercut because the undercut around Singapore is so powerful. It's such a long racetrack that if you get your tyres up to speed nicely, you can gain between 2 and 3 seconds on a lap on someone who's on older tyres. So often the leader doesn't want to give anyone the opportunity to undercut, and therefore they will pit into traffic, negating that advantage. But George Russell was out like a blooming greyhound out of the gate. He was just flying away. And you know what? Perfectly executed. He delivered a sensational strategy, never let up at the start of that Grand Prix. And by keeping Max Verstappen, his new name, Max Verstappen, is how we say it now.
Staying in second place, Max Verstappen.
He's Max Verstappen put, that's for sure. By keeping him at bay at the start, even though he was on those softer tyres, we saw the whole left side of the racetrack just getting appalling start.
More on that, because,
We'll get to that. It's treating some people very unfairly. It allowed him to essentially use Max on these now older soft tyres as a buffer to the cars that were faster behind him. Great strategy management, managed to pull out the gap that he needed to, and then you could hear at the end that he had pacing hand. He was managing that race car all the way to the end. Pacing hand was solid. No risk even coming through the traffic, which is exactly what you need when you're the race leader. This was a class race with George Russell. He was fantastic in qualifying yesterday, delivering the 2 fastest lap times across Q3. And he showed that true pace that the Mercedes had again. Perfect car, perfect driver combination today. Brilliantly executed. Well done, Mercedes. Well done, George.
This probably isn't the right way to do things, as I'm going to start from the very end. And I wasn't going to bring it up, but you just mentioned it. The Toto Wolff comment at the end over Team Radio. It's like, great. Driver and team combination, George. How about that? The combination of us and you worked very well. Here's your unsigned contract, if you wouldn't mind getting on with that. A very coded message, I thought. But I thought George Russell and Mercedes played this perfectly in that first stint, because it was fairly clear, I think, 5 or 6 laps into this, that Russell had the legs on Verstappen today, at least on those medium tyres. What they didn't know was whether they had the legs on the McLarens. And I think based on practice, their answer was probably not. In which case, it made sense for Russell and for Mercedes to work that advantage over Verstappen into that first stint. There was a point where he was averaging half a second per lap, to the point where if he continues that for the entire Grand Prix, he'd have won it by 30 seconds. Now, the progress slowed in the second half, and I think some of that was intentional, just based on how Russell was managing. Yeah, so I think they played it right. It looked like that lead was going to be something like 30 seconds if he was going to keep at that pace. Obviously, they didn't want to risk anything in that second half of the Grand Prix, so decided just to keep things going from there. But yeah, I just think based on Lando Norris being stuck behind Max Verstappen, they thought, if he gets that undercut done, which there was a potential for that, is Norris just going to catch and catch and catch? And suddenly, would I be really thankful that I had a 10-second gap or a 15-second gap? We knew coming into this weekend, Russell and Mercedes figured they had no chance whatsoever.
Hilarious.
Russell, yeah, I know, right? That seems to be the case with Mercedes these days. They only perform well at circuits they have no expectation at. But I think just based on that, they were probably worried if McLaren got free air, what they could do with it. So just extending that advantage out in the first stint made sense. And then the second stint was just very well managed. We didn't really hear much from George Russell, and the result was the same, but we saw Lando Norris last year when he had a dominant lead, a few near skirmishes with the wall. Had a few today as well.
Yeah.
Didn't really get that from Russell. He was kind of just left to run.
It's good if you can ever see him on the camera.
Yeah.
I think that about any race. If you're not seeing the leader, even around a racetrack like Monaco or Singapore, you think, wow, this guy is so in control of what's going on that the cameramen can't be bothered to put him on the screen because it's just boring for everyone to watch the fact that he's doing such a dominant job. There's no point following him around. Yeah,
exactly. If we're shifting focus to Max Verstappen for a minute, starting second, finishes second, try something a little bit different with the soft tyre to start this Grand Prix. As already referenced, those on the left-hand side of the grid struggled much more than on the right side, so is more defending from the McLarens rather than attacking George Russell at the start. It never felt like Verstappen was comfortable at this Grand Prix, yet he has walked away with more points than both McLarens that he could theoretically be fighting in a championship battle. Still a bit theory at this point. Do you think he'll be happy with how that race unfolded?
No, I don't think so. I think going Max Verstappen, they tried to do something different by starting on that soft tyre. And again, the left side of that racetrack just shafted anyone that even wanted to try something different. And that would have been the key to whether he could have won this race or not. If he could have gone in front of Russell at the start and commanded this race on those softer tyres, get away a little bit. Maybe he's hoping that Russell and Norris and Piastri will tangle a little bit and lose a few seconds, drop out of DRS range. He would have, in his mind, I think, unfolding a whole different Grand Prix in the way that did. But in the end, he ends up having car problems. It's unsettled. He doesn't feel comfortable with the way that the balance is taking place in his car. He's doing Max Verstappen things in a car that doesn't feel very Max Verstappen worthy, which is always so impressive. The way he's holding off Lando Norris and Piastri, who's a couple of seconds back for that entire race, just shows you the quality that he's able to bring to a race like here when he isn't comfortable. But the elusive Grand Prix win at Singapore continues to elude him. He can't get his hands on it.
He's going to get more questions about it next year, and he's going to be annoyed about it again because he didn't enjoy them all this week. He's going to get them even again in 2026.
Might retire. Maybe he'll just give up.
Yeah, for that reason.
I'm going to go Nordschleifer every weekend instead. Yeah. I thought he had a brilliant Grand Prix. And I actually thought the thing that Red Bull and Max Verstappen did so well was not being baited into the pit stop early by McLaren. It was a really well worked out call by the team. And they were right to call out the fact that if they had pitted, they would go straight into heavy traffic, 4 or 5 cars extra that they hadn't cleared yet in the way that the pit stop would have unfolded. But because of staying out and calling the bluff of McLaren, which we've seen a few times, and the Sky Comms team really seem to love giving credit. They even called it when Max did come in about going, oh, has he been baited again here? And he came out in the perfect spot right in front of Fernando Alonso with 8 seconds in front of him.
I could be wrong. I know I've mentioned this a couple of times over the years. I could be wrong. I felt certain that they banned that as a tactic to actually go out into the pit lane with the tyres.
They did.
And I can't remember them ever unbanning it, but they either did unban it or have just completely forgotten about the rule.
I think in theory you're allowed to do it once and that's about, and claim it's a mistake, right? You go, oh, our driver changed their mind. But you do it multiple. Ferrari, right, were the main culprits of this. So they did it 4 or 5 times a race. They'd rung out there, I think. Yeah. Anyway, that was the call. And that was the call that kept them in second place because it meant that Verstappen got that undercut done. We know that with the tyre offset, you need to have maybe 10, 15 lap difference in tyres minimum to realistically have the pace over a driver in front of you to get a move done. So whilst Norris was faster than Max Verstappen. The cars were close enough, and what Max was able to do was good enough that even on those older tyres, not by too much, but the older tyres meant that he could hold on. What Norris needed to actually do was to undercut Max and stop bluffing, stop trying to play a silly game, get in the pit lane early, get the tyres on, and close that gap down. So when Max does pit, he's in front and he can get after George Russell and then hold him off on older tyres if needs be. I actually think that was a bit of a strategic blunder from McLaren and a great call from Red Bull.
Yeah, I think Red Bull held their nerve because there was the potential for Lando Norris to go into the pits, and even if it was to go into traffic, could have started to make some overtakes on some fresher tyres. I think they realised the delta wasn't that strong at that stage and realised that waiting for the clean air was the right call. And they delivered expertly well on that strategy. So fair play to them. I think from Verstappen's side, there will just be, I don't know if it's disappointment or just an annoyance, frustration that there wasn't a little bit more in that car. I think it was, again, just really clear quite early on. This was a race where I think he was hoping that the soft tyres would be what he needed to get that lead at the start. But failing that, he would have hoped soft versus medium tyres. Okay, I could hold on to the back of George Russell at the very least for, say, 10 laps. And then maybe I fall away a little bit after that, but that's okay. Like, that's the risk of playing the soft tyre at that stage in the Grand Prix. Instead, that advantage that Russell had was kind of from the off. And I think Verstappen might have known at that stage that this is going to be a defensive race and not an attacking race. And it's going to be, can I hold on to second rather than can I go and get first? And in that respect, he has at least succeeded with his objective. He did hold off both McLarens. He has taken away, he has eaten into their points advantage. Probably not as much as he would have hoped after how qualifying went, but still by an okay amount. I think he defended well. He had that one off that cost him a couple of seconds when he was starting to build some momentum on George Russell. I think that was his biggest error on the day. But outside of that, I thought he raced pretty well. I thought Red Bull strategically handled this race pretty well. And I'm not sure they could have taken away anything more from this one than what they did. The worrying thing, I think, for the last part of this season for Verstappen and Red Bull is, again, tyre wear, because we saw Russell versus Verstappen on the same compound of tyre, the hard tyre. The first stint, they were obviously on different compounds, so it's tougher to compare. It felt like early in the stint, Verstappen had a little bit of an advantage on Russell. Like, we weren't looking at a 10-second gap anymore. If he was building in, he was eating into it. And then it kind of just faded a lot quicker than what it did for the Merc in front and the McLaren behind. So that will be a thing to keep an eye on as we go to some more, some hungry tracks that like to eat tyres like Qatar. I'm not sure how well they'll fare.
No, I think that could be a McLaren absolute wiping of the floor. If they've shown anything like they have around these long sweeping corners, that's going to be McLaren playground.
I think Russell, weirdly, will be very happy with how the race unfolded with Verstappen, because it was essentially a shield play. Not intentionally, but it was kind of a shield for him.
It was like a bigger version of what Sainz did with Norris when he had to hold off using the car behind. It was like having a blocker. And this is what we mean by when you have your teammate right with you. Because in theory, if you have a driver one and a driver two, that's what driver two would be doing. They'd be driving well. They would be putting their car wherever they can on the racetrack. They're holding back the cars behind. So driver one for the team can run off down the road, get the perfect strategy, go on to win. And effectively, despite, I don't know, despising each other off the racetrack, have they made up? We don't know. He was helping him. Verstappen was indirectly helping George Russell massively. And by sacrificing himself a little bit to this defensive race, he was handing George Russell the wing. There might have been a play that by letting Norris and Russell tangle, then maybe he might have had a chance at the victory, but you're really playing with risk versus reward there. In second place on a day like today for Verstappen, it felt like the best the outcome was going to give for him.
Yeah. And we'll see what Mercedes can do for the rest of this season. I'm sure that will be a topic for another day. But we know we've got Las Vegas coming up, where we are expecting them to be a bit stronger, which means they'll be probably 14th and last. But maybe they can be a factor at some of these other tracks that we weren't expecting them to be. It's not like they're going to be fighting for a championship. Russell probably isn't even fighting for third in the Drivers' Championship, but This is motor racing. You want to go out there and win. So it'll be interesting to see if they can add to their 2 victories and whether it will just be Russell that's adding to their victories.
So confusing, isn't it, that they are second in the constructors and yet Russell is barely even close to fighting for third in the drivers. It is the difference between having two drivers that can score points regularly and get your team up the table and having one driver that's clearly so much better than what the team could give him and being, 66 points away from winning the championship. It's crazy, the difference between those teams.
It is weird, that battle for second. I've said it before. Yeah. It's like it's a battle for who doesn't want it, because we've got Mercedes haven't had two drivers in the fight all year. Like Antonelli has been off the pace, particularly in the middle part of this year. He seems to be recovering now. But for whatever reason, that's still enough to beat Red Bull, who are consistently only having one car in the fight, and Ferrari, who keep Ferrarying themselves every weekend. So yeah, Mercedes are just there to pick up the scraps.
We're going to get onto it, but I can't believe both the brakes on the Ferraris just failed. I can't believe it.
We've discussed the top two, George Russell and Max Verstappen, as they qualified, but we now get on to the McLaren duo of Piastri and Norris. Not finishing in that order, though. Norris third place, despite being out-qualified by his teammate. Oscar Piastri having to settle for fourth. Should we start at the start? Because a bit of contact between them. At least initially, there was contact between Norris and Verstappen, but that contact sent Norris to the side of Oscar Piastri. No damage for Piastri that was going to cost him throughout the rest of the Grand Prix, but he did lose a spot to Norris as a result of it. Nearly put in the wall. Quite well avoided, I thought, that he didn't go into the wall. And Oscar Piastri not particularly happy about how the events unfolded. How did you see it?
It was a racing incident, I believe. And I think if we saw that with two random drivers, let's say it was Antonelli and Hamilton, for example, I think it would have been, it's a bit scruffy at the start, but everyone's away, bit of a bump in the wheels. For me, it was elbows out, bit of a mistake. We all got on with it. And I think because of the McLaren politics that we're seeing between these two at the moment, there is far more to analyse here than what's actually happened on the racetrack. So in terms of the actual incident, if you're looking at it from a top-down view, Norris has gone a little quick. He's tagged the back of Verstappen, which has caused his front wing damage, and then he's wheel bashed his teammate. That is, unfortunately, for McLaren, not where the problem actually lies. The problem actually lies in their word of fairness and how they're displaying their treatment of their two drivers. And you can understand from Oscar Piastri's cockpit on that turn how he could see that this is unfair. He was seething the entire Grand Prix. We've spoken so many times this season about how calm Oscar Piastri is, how level-headed he is, how he shrugs it off and gets on with it, and actually, more often than not, will still deliver a fantastic race performance, despite some kind of adversity, which we've seen a couple of times so far this season, caused partially by his own team. This was not the case. I think after what happened in Baku, where he went out of the race, I think, and then of course the events that happened in Monza previously as well, with the changing over of the pit stop. I think here he was looking to just have a solid performance against Lando Norris, specifically Lando Norris. So when in turn one he is bumped out of the way, and to him it feels like he's just been driven into, his claim of that's not very fair. This isn't a lot of teamwork between teams. How does that work? I can see why he is vocal. I can see why he is protesting against how McLaren have dealt with this. But from a neutral point of view, from outside the cockpit point of view, I think you can see that it was an accident. It was a bit brash. And Norris is probably driven off going, oh, sorry, bump of the tyres, we move on with it, we get on with it. But the cars do seem to be slightly falling Lando Norris's way a little bit the last few Grand Prix. What do you think about it then?
I think Norris was ambitious, but I don't think that's a bad thing in this situation. He's the one who's doing the chasing in this championship. And I know that if he decided to hang back and let Verstappen and Piastri battle over that position instead, we probably would be on here saying Norris has got to force the issue. Norris has got to get involved in this if he sees half an opportunity. So I'm not going to hold it against Norris for trying. It was clumsy. He's a bit fortunate as well. Obviously, he picked up damage, but not damage that cost him reasonably any race time. If it was just even slightly worse than that, he could have required the front wing to be changed. There were a few questions at the beginning of this Grand Prix. Would we see the FIA force McLaren in to change that front wing? Fortunately for McLaren, they didn't. But the way this race unfolded and how important track position is, that would have been devastating. He probably would have got back to 8th But
yeah, I mean, you're beating Hamilton and Leclerc after those events happen, so maybe he would finish 6th or 7th at a push.
Yeah, and he's losing even more ground to Piastri, so he's lucky to get away with that. I think from Piastri's perspective, I can completely understand why he's aggrieved with this. I agree that it's a racing penalty, but I understand Piastri's viewpoint, because whilst we are looking at this from a almost like a bird's eye view, we can see how the start unfolded, how this event caused this event, and the chain reaction of it all. Piastri, when you're on board with him, all you see is a McLaren going into the side of you, and you've got no idea that he has touched Verstappen, which has then forced him into you, and that's why you're out there. Now, from Piastri's side, like, he would say, well, it doesn't really change anything for me. I'm still being forced out here. I've still lost a spot thanks to the actions of my teammate, which weren't good. I'm sure there's a better word there.
Well, he phrased it himself, didn't he? He went, I don't think that's very good teamwork. My teammate crashing into the side of me. He's right. That's not what teamwork is.
But ultimately, I understand why they didn't go ahead and change the positions on this, because I don't know if they'd have done it anyway. Piastri couldn't get close to Norris.
Pace wasn't there to go, was it? I don't know if that's a symptom of the head loss, being frustrated, behind the wheel, being angry, or we've seen it a couple of times this season. Monaco, most specifically, he doesn't have the pace on a street circuit, and they've not been his friend so far this season. He did well at Jeddah, and he did okay when it came to Miami, but that's about it. All the other street circuits, you'd argue, either from pace or genuine finishing position, Canada probably being the exception there, that Norris obviously crashed into the back of him, but was faster. They've not been his friend this season.
No, and I thought we might be getting a sort of Monza situation where, if you remember, Norris was ahead of Piastri, and it looked fairly comfortable in that little battle between them. Norris had a pretty comfortable lead. And then it's turned out that Piastri was playing a bit of a waiting game and was saving the tyres a little bit for the second half of the stint. And suddenly Piastri gets much closer to Lando Norris, to the point where the whole discussion about the undercut, overcut was even a thing. I thought we might be looking at the same thing here today. I just don't think we were. I think this was a case of Piastri's pace had gone missing versus Lando Norris. The only time Piastri got significantly closer to his teammate was at the end of this race, when Lando Norris wasn't showing what he could fully do because he was stuck behind Max Verstappen. And even then, I was expecting Piastri to get on the back of those two at all, but like quite quickly. And it was slow trucking. He didn't get there very quickly. And even when he did, not enough time to really do anything about it. So this wasn't a great weekend for Piastri. I gave him credit for what he did in qualifying, where he pulled it together enough, I think, to beat his teammate, beat Antonelli where it wasn't guaranteed. And the fact that he's only lost 3 points to his teammate, he probably takes that.
He probably does take it, because we've got 6 races left. If there is a 3-point gap between those two every single race from now, and hey, look, the win is not guaranteed for a McLaren these days. That's 3 in a row that they've not won now, remember. He will win the championship. It's a maximum of 18 points game by Norris. He'll still finish 4 points clear come the final Grand Prix. Piastri probably needs one really solid Grand Prix left where he picks up a victory to make sure that realistically this is probably in his hands without any real issues unfolding his way. I think the bigger issue for McLaren, which I think they're going to have to sit down with Oscar and speak to him privately about, I think they're at risk of losing his loyalty. I think they are at risk of losing this papaya rules, we do our team thing. Brundle was right where he was like, I think we just rewrote the rules with how that happened from Piastri's side. Piastri seems like a level-headed, calm guy, but I do think you only take so much of swap position, do this, change this. Can you try this? Before you go, no, I'm leading the championship. I want to win.
It's exhausting, man.
It's tiring.
I was kind of done with it yesterday, and I'm even more done with it today. Now that the championship is settled, shut up, McLaren. Yeah. Just let them crack on. Go go side of the garage versus side of the garage. Your championship is sealed, constructors-wise. Let them fight. And honestly, it comes from McLaren most of the time. All of this chat about, well, do you want the pit stop? Do you want them to take the pit stop first? Do you want to avoid the undercut? At one point today, Piastri just said, I don't know. You do it. Yeah. That's how it should be. You're the one with all the data. Sure, ask your drivers' opinions, but they're kind of busy racing around a street circuit at 200 miles an hour at 200 degrees. Come
Lando
on.
Norris is going, no, but. Like, he doesn't know, does he?
That's on Melbourne.
Vicky Pollard's in the car. He's driving a race car, like you said, around one of the most difficult racetrack we have in the entire season. And you're going, do you want to get Piastri in the undercut, your championship rival and, closest competition? Yeah, no, wait. What's the question? What's the question? What are you asking me? Put me in the best position. You're my engineer. Put me in the best position. What's the debate? Why is this a struggle every single time we get to a race course now for this team? It's a very frustrating dynamic to listen to.
Yeah, and we get the whole, we'll sit down after the race and do a full debrief on... No,
every week.
There was a racing incident at turn 1. You went into the side of him. You both carried on. And then you finished 3rd and 4th. And then next race, you can go racing. No Constructors' Championship to think of. All the best. We have no dog in this fight. Wish you all the best for the Drivers' Championship, but it's up to you on the racetrack. Like, it's
now your engineer versus that engineer.
Yeah.
You will call the driver in front gets pit stop priority as always. That's the only rule.
But they'll come out with, Papaya rules have been downgraded to 4 out of 10 as a result of the Constructors' Championship, but that's actually downgraded to 3 out of 10 if this situation occurs, which it just has, even if you think it's dubious.
They'll do that all over the team radio, though, as well, live.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have to sit there and work it out, and the drivers will have to... it's just farcical. It is farcical. I respect how much they're trying to keep people happy, but it just becomes more trouble than it's worth at this point.
And there's a lot of positives for McLaren, not even relating to today. They're the only team that's had 2 drivers in the top 4, for example. But with this race sealing the Constructors' Championship, I think midweek will be a point where we get to fully go into how McLaren have won this championship so early on. Again, they've defended their championship from last year, but very different circumstances as to how they've got there. They have been dominant all year long. We'll break that down midweek, I think, a little bit more. But congratulations to them in the first instance, even if you annoy me sometimes. With that, shall we focus on our driver of the day?
Let's do it.
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
Now, we don't usually follow the vote that happens, the masses, the Salesforce driver of the day, but looking at the results with a few laps to go, it was a very close 3-horse race. In the end, it was given to Fernando Alonso. Your driver of the day, Sam?
I'm going Russell. They came into this weekend very uncertain about how they were going to do, and I think a lot of the hard yards were done in qualifying, and Russell looked monumental in qualifying. He was such a beast. He was so controlled, so put together. And I think he carried that perfectly through to the race. He only doesn't get a grand slam because Lewis Hamilton decided to whack on the soft tyres before his brakes exploded. So fair play to George Russell, pure domination, pure control. He deserved it. He deserved it this season. I'm glad he's got a really good race like that. I think Alonso was a great shout. I think Verstappen was a great shout. And there was a couple others up and down the grid as well that I thought were really, really good. But I'm going Russell.
Yeah, I think this is a rare occasion where I agree with the people in that they had it as a very close fight between Alonso, Russell, Verstappen, and that's kind of how I saw it as well. I think you could feasibly give it to all 3 of those. I would definitely put Carlos Sainz in the mix as well to go from 18th to 10th on a race where overtaking was incredibly difficult, and the way in which he and Williams executed that strategy was impressive. He wasn't the only one who tried something similar, but he was the only one that made it work from the worst grid spot out there. So well done to him. I am going to agree with the people completely. I'm going to go with Fernando Alonso. He was held back thanks to that awful pit stop. And I just felt at that point, oh, not again. He's in position for some good points, and it's just going to go horribly wrong for him. But he recovered very well. He deserved the points that he got without needing to make those overtakes. But he was given a bit of extra work to do, a bit of homework, and he nailed it. He got those overtakes done pretty clinically, including on the likes of Hadjar. I think without that slow pit stop, it would have unfolded that this race was basically the top 7 drivers were like this good. Yeah. Everyone else was like pretty similar at this level. And then Fernando Alonso was just in like a Formula 1.5 world by himself, which kind of is how it ended up, but just not aided by the pit stop.
I thought he had a really good race. He had that battle with Hadjar as well. Champion of the race, or whatever it was. So Fernando.
I'm so Team Radio of the Year. there are
so
some
good.
strong contenders from today.
Yeah,
are going to appear in moment of the race, guaranteed. But
God. But what a battle that was! Great wheel-to-wheel racing with those two.
Yeah, Hadjar having to deal with some engine issues. Sadly enough, didn't quite hold on for points. Ended up finishing 11th, but made a good effort.
Brave race from him.
Yeah. Worst driver of the day.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
Now, of course, we're recording this directly after the race has finished, and we don't record our power rankings until tomorrow, which is a Patreon exclusive. If you're not already a part of Patreon, would absolutely encourage you to do so. The link is in the description. I'm looking forward to the episode. One of the reasons is, don't hold me to this in case I change my mind, I don't know if anyone's going to get worse than like a 4 out of 10. I don't think anyone was bad.
Yeah, it wouldn't be far below if I was scoring someone that far.
No one had a disaster.
There's no twos going on here. That's for sure. Yeah. There's a couple that I was pretty surprised about that didn't progress in the way I thought they would. I'm going to give my worst driver of the day to... it's between either Gasly or Hulkenberg, really. Hulkenberg coming off. I mean, Bortoletto put it in the wall on his own by the looks of it. But Gasly just couldn't overtake anyone. Colapinto still finished 2-3 places in front of him despite the chaos. And Gasly's behind Ocon. He's behind Colapinto. He's behind the likes of Lawson. Only Hulkenberg is behind him. But I'm going to go Hulkenberg just simply for the mistake all on his own. But you're right. It's not. I'm having to be picky. It wasn't an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I think those are fair. Hulkenberg, it's tough to know whether the issue was on him or not. Obviously, where he goes off, not into the barriers, but it looked like we might finally get a virtual safety car or a safety car in a race that almost always delivers one. Not quite.
Why?
I ended up with Gasly as well. I know that maybe Colapinto's strategy aided him a bit because Colapinto, he pit very early on.
Yeah.
He went in on lap 14, whereas Gasly was out there for another 10 laps. And starting from the pit lane in an Alpine, I'm not sure what the expectations should have been. But yeah, Colapinto made more of this race than what Gasly could. It looked like, and it's not like this was against the trend of the weekend as well. It looked like Colapinto had the better of Gasly all throughout practice and qualifying too. So I'm going to go with Gasly, but he wasn't that bad. Like, it's just no DNFs. Big brain Strat.
Bob, we're gonna need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
Never gets old.
Never.
Big brain Strat. What have you got?
I'm going for what I spoke about earlier, which is McLaren desperately tried to bait Max Verstappen and Red Bull, only for them to actually lose out on their own baiting. Max Verstappen to pit at the right lap and execute the undercut, the overcut, I suppose, perfectly to keep Lando Norris behind. And that was pretty much the one opportunity that McLaren could have had to have gotten in front of the Red Bull, and they fluffed it, absolutely ruined their chances. So for me, terrible call from McLaren, great call from Red Bull.
My big brain Strat is further back from where you're at, but there were a couple of viable strategies if you were in the midfield today to gain some positions. Option number one was do what Colapinto did. Now, I appreciate Colapinto hasn't scored points or anything, but he is in an Alpine, and he still did benefit from pitting on lap 14. To go onto the medium tyres as well, at which point David Croft on Sky Sports coverage, he's doing a 2-stop. No, these tyres will last forever. He'll do a 1-stop.
How can you go from saying the soft tyres are more robust to saying that he can't get to the end on medium tyres from them? Like, where's the logic there?
So I thought that strategy was viable. The other strategy that was viable was what Carlos Sainz did, which is be the last person to pit and therefore go all the way from 18th to 10th. Both strategies work really well, which are the two strategies that Esteban Ocon has deployed all year.
Not
this
today.
Was the one race where Haas pit Esteban Ocon in the middle of the race.
Oh, God. Haas are so good at strategy. They're so good at it.
It's just really funny. Like, I think it was lap 30 of 62, they pit Ocon. And Ocon could have done the same thing as Sainz, I'm pretty convinced. But
the way they've called it every season, we should pit win the first 10 laps. That'll get them. oh, we should pit on the last 5 laps. That'll get them. Not today.
And yet, this was the one that might have worked out.
Yeah.
So that is our big brain strat, folks. Let us know if you think we've missed anything on there. And also on driver of the day and worst driver of the day. Is there someone who deserved a nomination that didn't get one? Give us a shout. We've already discussed one of the Mercedes drivers, that being George Russell taking the race win. Now, the last time that Russell took the race win, Antonelli joined him on the podium in 3rd place. Not to be today, with Antonelli needing to make an overtake on Charles Leclerc quite late on. Not quite as late on as what the Sky Sports duo thought it was, but needed to get that overtake done on Charles Leclerc. Makes it happen for P5. How will he come away from this weekend?
I think he'll be a little frustrated. I think this race was all right for Kimi Antonelli. And if you know what, if this is an all right race for Kimi Antonelli in his rookie season, finishing 5th behind the 2 title protagonists, Max Verstappen, the issue being, though, that the guy in front of all of them is his teammate, George Russell. If George was anywhere in that gap that wasn't first, you look at this and go, that's respectable. This 19-year-old is finishing a couple of spots behind regular race winner George Russell, holding his own. But Russell wasn't just winning this race. He was so comfortably out front. And that is, again, the problem that we've had so many times with kind of not necessarily was a rookie, but, you know, a driver that's maybe new to a team where their teammate is really off down the road. He was unlucky with the start as well. He, you know, got caught up behind what was going on with the McLarens in front and Verstappen, and Leclerc had the better line around the outside, which we've seen already affect multiple people negatively, Hamilton including, who was the other car involved in this kind of 3-way fight that was going on. He got a little lucky at the end. The brakes on the Ferraris going means that he was able to essentially scamper through. Hamilton's quite literally broke and Leclerc was dealing with brake problems. It meant that he was able to recover from any issues. But it's the raw pace for me that was a bit of a problem in comparison to his teammate. I don't feel like he was being held up by Leclerc for the whole Grand Prix. Only at the start did it feel like he was really trying to get past him. Then the gap started to grow. He fell out of DRS. It became kind of 1.5, 2 seconds, maybe 3. So good race. Solid, nothing particularly special. I think because of that, I think Kimi will be frustrated considering where George is.
I think there will be frustration. I think there'll be a few emotions, but frustration is one of them because I think there was more on the table than what he was able to deliver. My instinct here is that he was quicker versus Russell than he was at Canada, even though he got the podium at Canada and he was 5th place here. I think all the way throughout practice, even throughout the early parts of qualifying, there was nothing to choose between them. And I think you could make the case that Antonelli was actually quicker than Russell up until maybe Q2 of qualifying.
It's a bad time to stop being faster than your teammate.
It sure is. And honestly, I don't even know if during the race, the start killed him. Like the start, getting trapped behind either Ferrari, he just put himself in the wrong race. He wanted to be in that race, at least with the McLarens, ideally with Verstappen and Russell. And I'm actually really intrigued as to what he could have done. I think he would have been in the mix. But ultimately, with how difficult it was to make overtakes here, particularly in the first half of the race where all tyre wear was the same, we saw that no one was really to make. The first overtake was maybe Behrman versus Albon, but that was after Behrman had pit. Like, we didn't really see any overtakes after the first couple of corners throughout that first stint. First half of the race, all tyre wear's the same. That sounds like something. It sounds like a sprint race. We should do one of those next year here.
Sprints are pouring coming.
So I think Antonelli will be disappointed. I think he could have got it in that fight without needing to deal with the Ferraris, but it's inexperience. And I think what you're talking about, where he kind of fell off the back of Leclerc, at least at one point. I think he was, and Hadjar was guilty of this as well. Maybe it's a rookie thing. They're almost like they can stay within 7-8 tenths of the car ahead. So they do. And it's not the best idea for them. Because whilst it does put them in theory in a position to make an overtake if the car in front makes an error, if you had the pace to get by on a track like this, you'd have already done it. And
you just eat your tyres up. You just heat everything up and you lose your pace.
You'll see it from the more experienced drivers on this grid. They will realise, I can't get the overtake done even if I think I'm a little bit faster. I might as well just drop back 2 seconds.
Ironically, Hamilton, a prime example of this, he was sat about 1.8 to 2.1 behind Antonelli. And the moment there was any chance of getting closer, you see him drift right back up to DRS again. And then he goes back in second because you've got to cool your car. God, Ferrari need to work on that car. Going to laugh at them in a minute. But yeah, there's still much to learn. But I do think there are some real positive signs for Antonelli over the last couple of Grand Prix. He has stepped forward since that awkward middle period of this season where he looked like he was struggling. And I think the car caused him to struggle. But I think it's coming back.
I definitely think it's coming back. I think these two races have been his best back-to-back races so far this year. You could argue maybe Canada was better than Baku or Canada was better than here, sure. But I think in terms of a 1-2 hit, I think this is the best we've seen from him.
I'm with you.
Be interesting to see what he can do in the remainder of the season. Obviously, the Mercedes made a lot of changes to the car to try and take it away from the wrong direction they'd gone down in the summer. So maybe that's helping Antonelli quite a lot as he looks to re-sign with Mercedes as we go into next year. Ferrari, I'll be real, I don't know where Hamilton's going to finish this race just based on the investigation into what...
I don't think he'll care either. I do not think he'll care because how are the brakes broken? How has this happened?
It's Ferrari.
It's just the most laughable thing. Oh, all to play for tomorrow, their social media posts saying as they qualify 6th and 7th.
Not quite all.
Not quite all. That's not how the points are rewarding Ferrari. The worst part is I was going to come on this podcast initially and commend them for how good an idea it was to put him on that soft tyre because it was working. It was actually working. He caught Leclerc very quickly. He was a rocket on those soft tyres. Caught Leclerc. They did the right thing. They quickly swapped the cars around. Good job. Get them out of the way fast. You see Leclerc 3-4 seconds behind at that point. Good move. He catches Antonelli. They're wheel to wheel. Oh my goodness me. Ferrari have pulled out a blinder when it comes to strategy. He will beat a Mercedes. No, because the car is made of actual paper mache, and apparently it can't last a normal Grand Prix anymore because if one thing is fixed, whether that be the suspension, the floor, the board on the bottom, the plank, we got that sorting out. Now the brakes don't work. How are you doing this, Ferrari?
I think strategically what they did made sense. I was ready to criticize them earlier on in the Grand Prix because I felt that one team and one driver could take the advantage of essentially this unfolding into 2 Grand Prix. You had the top 7 and then everyone else.
Yeah.
Whoever was 7th had the opportunity to just go really long on that first stint because they knew that as soon as they came in for fresh tyres, they weren't going to have to overtake any of these midfield runners. They'll still be clear of them. So I was ready to be critical of Ferrari because I felt like they could have done with that with Hamilton, but they still went with a similar strategy. They still went for that tyre offset at the end of the Grand Prix. And it was a good call. It looked like it was going to pay off. I feel bad for Hamilton here because he did what he needed to do in qualifying to out-qualify Leclerc, which is no mean feat. It's not something he's done very regularly this year, which puts him on the wrong side of the grid. And ultimately, he would have been better off probably being out-qualified by his teammate. Kind of stuck from there. And then to cap it all off, his brakes fail. And it's difficult to comment too much on the brakes failing because we didn't see any of it.
All we saw was this spark come out of his front left tyre, which evidently the brakes have gone. I'm assuming all he's done is he's driven around the racetrack at about 40 miles an hour and just coasted over every curve possible to get around the corners without any major problems. The gap to Alonso at that point was 41 seconds. It was 0.6 at the line. He must have been at a scale's pace. You'd have to argue, really, that he should have been retired from the Grand Prix.
Well, that's going to be the question, I think, for the stewards. the track limits things, that's a bit more black and white. If he's had to cut corners to get around, then you give however many 5-second penalties he deserves.
Although you'd argue he didn't gain any advantage, but
but that's how it works, isn't it? It's just. But I think the bigger question is whether he should have been in the position to cut those corners at all, and whether Ferrari should have shut this thing down.
For me, that was a safety risk. And if, for example, when the front wing is hanging off, you get called, you get the meatball flag, you come on in and you're told to change that front wing through danger of another. If there is a sudden crash in the wall and Hamilton can't hit the brakes fast enough to get himself out of it and it hurts someone, that's a safety risk.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to legislate, I appreciate, because you could argue it's not just brakes are working, brakes have failed. There's a lot of middle ground that I think Hamilton was somewhere in the midst of. But I think there maybe should be some sort of rule of if you can't get within X% of the race leader's time or something like that.
The average grid time at this point, right?
Yeah. They've got time on their hands. They can figure out exactly what it is. But maybe something like that, because you're right, it's a safety risk. And we don't want Hamilton's brakes to completely fail going into a heavy braking zone, and suddenly we have questions about should he have been out there. It's one thing for an incident like that to happen, but just randomly, and there's just no expectation it's going to happen. When there are probably a few people in the team going, should we pull it? Should we stop it here? Then it becomes.
And again, for what, Ferrari? For what, another 4 points it might be? What a waste of a championship winner that is.
I think the awful thing for Ferrari, outside of everything, is that Leclerc, when he was interviewed, was it after Baku? After Monza, sorry. And he was asked, what are your best chances of competing for the rest of this season? 2 of the 3 tracks I think he listed were Baku and Singapore.
They've been nowhere.
They're nowhere.
No, they nearly got lapped. Russell not lapped. Alonso just managed to not get to him. They were less than 30 seconds away from being lapped. I mean, for a Ferrari in the top 10, that is atrocious. And not from the dominant car of the season either. That's really poor.
Can I have a mini rant about something that somewhat relates to Ferrari here?
I would love you to. I love a Ben rant.
So the last couple of laps that we just didn't get to see.
None of it at all.
Alonso catching Hamilton. We didn't have any idea how much Hamilton was struggling. Even before this point, the race direction today was woeful. It was
so many overtakes.
Awful.
No, not shown.
Well, that's the thing. There were barely any overtakes to begin with in this Grand Prix, and we missed every one that happened.
Yeah.
Like the Antonelli one, we just got on board at the time it was happening. It was
hard to go if he ever actually got a move done. I don't even really know how it happened.
There was one that happened like in the side-by-side sort of box and the first one that happened, Behrman versus Albon, like literally the only overtake of the first half of this Grand Prix.
I still haven't seen it. I don't know. People are raving about it. I don't know what's happened.
Dove up the inside of him, but yeah.
Great, well done.
Yeah, I just thought the race direction was really bad today.
It's usually Monaco that is the poor race direction. Yeah. This was woeful.
What about that midfield battle? So Alonso has ended up with at least 4 points here, maybe more depending on what happens with Lewis Hamilton. Behrman, Carlos Sainz both in the points as well. Very different ways of getting there, you would say, across those 3 drivers. But what did you make of that fight?
I thought all 3 of them were fantastic. Absolutely. And I'm actually gutting for Hadjar, who, as we mentioned earlier, finishes 11th, because despite his ailing car, I thought he had a brilliant Grand Prix as well. I thought for a fight for measly 1, 2, 4 points, they put up a real effort here. Alonso, he can't get it right, can he? In terms of, the way his race unfolds, it's not his fault the way it went, but the pit stop wasn't perfect. Then he gets stuck behind Lance Stroll's train. Now, do you think that Lance Stroll was left out intentionally to back those cars up towards Alonso? Or was it just, hey, I'm Lance Stroll, I'm never going to pit?
Honestly, it could be either. They probably didn't have much to lose at that point, but you could say it helped him out, so it might have been intentional.
Maybe. Alonso's pace was sensational, and I do think that there is one of those Grand Prix where he was never going to be able to really compete with the cars in front. The Aston Martin just isn't there, and the way the track unfolded for him, it just wasn't suiting him. But he was so far ahead of absolutely everyone else involved. Behrman and Sainz, on the other hand, they got to their points completely different ways. I want to commend Carlos Sainz. After being disqualified in qualifying both him and his teammate, look where they ended up, the difference between them. I was amazed by Carlos Sainz. I'm very pleased that I kept him in my fantasy team.
Yes,
very happy.
Me too.
Yeah.
A lot of patience from Carlos Sainz to get that result.
Yeah, exactly that.
It didn't look like that was going to be points for nearly all of this Grand Prix. And they stuck with that strategy. He kept those tyres alive very well. Something he struggled with a little bit towards the beginning of this year. And then took full advantage of those soft tyres in a way that a couple of other drivers didn't. Like Lawson had a very similar strategy.
Couldn't get near him.
Yeah. So
couldn't get near him. I mean, all for a point, which is a real shame. But we did say this about them in the preview, that actually, whilst Williams were going to struggle here a little bit, I knew they wouldn't struggle as much as they were talking about. They thought they might be the 9th fastest car. They deployed a fantastic strategy. Sainz was so cool and calm and collected, and he executed that strategy exactly how it should have been. Maybe he could have beaten Behrman on a perfect day, maybe. But, a point out of all that, not too shabby.
Yeah, I echo your thoughts. I thought all three were great. Alonso, even with the bad luck, he made the most that he possibly could out of this Grand Prix. There aren't any more points he could have got from today. And, the fact that he was still in the conversation for overtaking Behrman and overtaking these other drivers, pretty impressive. Behrman, I thought, was very good. He was helped out a little bit as a result of the slow pit stop of Alonso and then Hadjar also having those engine issues, because he could effectively perform an overcut on Hadjar, which is obviously very rare at this type of circuit. But he still made the most of it, got an overtake done on Albon, was then a little bit more stuck as he came up to, I think it was Carlos Sainz, and then a couple of other drivers in front of him. And I think that's probably what cost him 8th place to Fernando Alonso here, is that Alonso made the most of his medium tyres. And it was a very aggressive call, by the way, from Aston Martin to go soft to medium, but I think it was the right one. Whereas Behrman couldn't quite get the most from his hard tyres when they were at their best, to the point where when Alonso was on the back of him, he was able to take advantage. So maybe 1 or 2 more clinical overtakes from Behrman, and this is a perfect day from him, but still good points at your first ever Grand Prix here.
This is a classic case of if Pirelli had just stretched the way the tyres work a little more, we could have had a really interesting Grand Prix. If the hard tyres could go on for affinity laps, but were quite a bit slower, but those soft tyres, if you were to do a 2 or 3 stop with maybe soft, medium, or just medium to hard, I really think you could have had one of those converging Grand Prix here today. It was one of those races that never quite got there, I feel.
Yes. Yeah. And part of it is, at least out front, is Max Verstappen. And I don't blame Max Verstappen. He's doing what he can do to score as many points as possible. If one of those McLarens is second or third, like after the first corner of the first lap, maybe we get a barnstormer similar to what we had a few years ago when there was a battle for the lead very late on. I think entirely possible, but yeah, that's the way it unfolded. We should really review our bold predictions.
I'm in favour of just skipping one. We could break tradition.
Well, I would do, but Harry has specifically messaged to say, you must do bold predictions today. Unfortunately, he's not here to collect his crown, but he was wrong, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Zing!
Harry Eade said that there would be 5 different constructors in the top 5. There were 3 constructors in the top 5, which, if you're counting, folks, is literally the smallest number you can have in a top 5.
Yeah, I guess it'll work like that.
Yeah, unlucky, Harry. If I could do a graph of mine, and this is a slightly visual reference, folks, my bold prediction was that Fernando Alonso would score a podium. After FP1, where he was first, I was up here, and then he was 4th in FP2. That's still pretty good. And then whatever they did to the car overnight didn't really work, so it got even worse from there. He gets to Q3, but isn't in the mix with the top guys. And I thought, it's going to have to be a crazy Singapore GP for him to get in the mix now. And it just wasn't. He was very good here this weekend, but that car wasn't quite as good as I thought it might be.
Well, yours was definitely more optimistic and closer than mine, because Yuki Tsunoda was going even close to beating Max Verstappen.
Qualifying sealed it, didn't it?
I'm just so annoyed at Yuki. I want him to do well. It's so frustrating to see him every single race week. Something goes wrong. 6 more chances to get it right, Yuki.
It's, this one might have sealed it. I don't know.
I think so.
The thing is, his pace in the Grand Prix, I thought, was okay. He had to pull off quite an aggressive strategy based on where he stopped. The start was horrible for him.
Yeah.
He dropped 3 spots on the start. Despite being on the better side of the grid, I think. But he managed it all right from there. He was quite comfortably clear of other drivers on the same strategy in the midfield, which I appreciate is not where he should be anyway. But when you're qualifying outside the top 10 at Singapore, you're going to have a tough time.
Look, if Sainz could get up to P10, starting from behind him, realistically, he should have been fighting for that last point. He should have been beating Hadjar when he was struggling with that engine, for example.
Yeah. So No points for Yuki Tsunoda, I'm afraid. And no points for us on bold predictions. What's new? It's time for moment of the race. Sam, what have you got?
I'm going nice and easy. It's the Alonso Hadjar battle. For me, it was pretty much the only proper battle that we got. And whilst Fernando Alonso's team radio reaction was sensational, it was actually great to see some brilliant wheel-to-wheel racing around Singapore. So that's going to take it from me. What about you, Ben?
It's team radio galore.
Yeah.
Either of the Alonso team radios could make it, and I won't spoil the other one in case it comes up with another moment of the race. Just because I think it has a chance of winning an award at the end of the season, I'm going to give my moment of the race to something else, which is just the perfect encapsulation of Ferrari's season, which was Lewis Hamilton, whose brakes have completely failed, having to let Charles Leclerc past him on the start-finish straight, only for Charles Leclerc's dodgy brakes to mean he goes too far off and he doesn't make the corner. Still keeps it. It's just, that was Ferrari's race and Ferrari's season. That, in a nutshell.
How did you get it this wrong? I can't.